Hi there, and welcome to That's Why. So, this is conference week, and I have gotten a bunch of questions about distance learning. Today, I'm going to answer one of them, which is how do I bring higher order thinking skills into my distance learning? So, in today's That's Why, I'm going to talk about how you can bring it into your distance learning, into your classroom learning, into your hybrid learning, and even into your own life with your own kids if you want to, with this one very simple way. So thanks for joining me on That's Why. Okay, so let's talk about one easy way to encourage students in meaningful critical thinking. And incidentally, yes, that is my dog with her squeak toy in the background. She wants to get my attention. Anyways, I'm going to keep going. So there's lots of definitions of critical thinking, depending on what source you use, where you're going for information, and so on and so forth. As a learning theorist, of course, this is one of the things that I love to do, is to find out what critical thinking is, how it's defined, how it's used. And what I came up with is a working definition that's going to be useful for you teaching, and also a definition that kind of aligns with a lot of the work and the stuff that I've been doing in my videos that you've probably already seen or you're going to see as you watch some of these. So, critical thinking I define as the active process of analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating, reflecting, and applying information toward specific situations and contexts. Now, I say active process of analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating, reflecting, and applying, because if you have students that are sitting in the middle of a lecture listening to you talk or watching a video, that's not necessarily critical thinking. Here's the reason why. They're not actively using the information that's coming out of those presentations. Now, of course, the question from the conference is, how do we do this in distance learning, right? But the way I'm going to explain it is I'm going to share with you ways that we can do it in distance learning, but ways that we can do it in other contexts and settings as well. First, let's start with thinking about critical thinking in relation to our classroom. And what I want to present to you is the bicycle model. So in this model, let's imagine that the information that you give to a student in a classroom is a bike. Okay, this is the content, this is the information that you're providing in books, videos, vocabulary lists, processes, and so on. It's information, right? So just like a bicycle, if we give a bike to somebody, here's the seat, here's the brake, here's the pedal, the wheels, so on and so forth. However, unless a student does something with that information, they're never going to learn how to ride the bike. You can't ride a bike unless you get on the bike and you learn how to ride it. Which means, think about what it takes to actually learn how to ride a bike. We have to pedal, we have to balance, we have to get on the bike, fall, get back on the bike, and keep going as we learn the skills to use the bicycle. Critical thinking is about skills, applying skills. What do you do with the information in terms of analysis, synthesis, evaluate, reflect, and reply? These are the skills that students need to learn, but these are the skills involved in critical thinking. So, going back to the bike metaphor, even though you're providing the information, in order for kids to critically think about that information, they have to get on the bike and ride the bike. They have to use that information. They have to analyze it, synthesize it, evaluate it, reflect, and apply it before they can get the skills for critical thinking. And just like riding a bike, it takes practice, right? And in some cases, like some people, they get on the bike, they fall a lot, they try again, and they fall until they get it. Other people, they use training wheels. My dad taught me how to ride a bike. He grabbed the back of the bike seat and ran with me as I learned how to ride that bike. okay? So scaffolds are important. You can't just expect students to analyze something if they've never analyzed something before. They need scaffolds, they need training wheels, they need guidance in order to do this. But here's the difference. You are not riding the bike for them. You're not analyzing for them. This is something that you expect students to do for you. As a QP, a parent, a caretaker, a relative, whomever is teaching your student, right? As an adult, you should also have that expectation that, what opportunities do I have for my child to analyze, to synthesize, evaluate, reflect, and apply? What opportunities do they have to practice these skills? I'm going to show you how to do that. First, remember, when it comes to distance learning, less is more. So what I mean by that, and you've probably seen this in some of my other videos, is that when we go to distance learning, everything that you get students to do, every platform, every new procedure, even the skills to communicate online is a cognitive load. In addition to the information, kids have to learn how to use the platform. Think about how long it takes you to learn a platform. It's going to take kids that long, if not longer, because they may not be comfortable with the information at all. So what I mean by less is more is you've got to lessen the cognitive load, fewer platforms, more procedures and routines, right? Things that are more automated. So it's just the information that provides the cognitive load and nothing else. So less is more. No shiny objects. Keep shiny objects to a minimum. But here's the converse, the corollary of that I'm going to introduce for you. Do more with less. So whatever it is that you've put on the platform, whatever information you provide, the skills is the more. What skills can kids do with the information you provide? Are they analyzing? Are they evaluating? Are they synthesizing or applying that information to something? That's the more piece that I invite you to think about when you're doing distance learning, and actually when you're doing learning in general, right? When you're thinking about learning in general. In other words, breadth over depth and deepen learning through higher order questions. I'll talk about that in a second. Now here's the reason why I talk about doing more with less. I talk about emphasizing skills and process over giving kids more information. It's because one big factor of learning that we always underestimate is how much time it's going to take a student to learn something. This is not something that you as a teacher can really control, other than instructional design and multiple opportunities to apply or interact with that information, right? But other than that, it's still going to take time, and that time cannot be rushed in many cases. But what you can do is give students more opportunities to interact with that information, to manipulate it. That's what I mean by depth over breadth. Because if you give students a lot of information, flood them with information, try and cover that information as much as possible, you're still not going to maximize learning. That makes sense, right? I mean, think about even us, our learning capacity. If you're inundated with lots of information, no matter what happens, you're not going to learn it unless you have time, given time to learn it, right? Even in college, I used to have my days where I would cram for a test. It's true. If I cram for a test overnight, yes, I may ace the test, but I won't remember that stuff a week later because I didn't actually learn it. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. To get students to learn information, they must have time to process it, but they also must have time to interact with it. There's where those higher order thinking skills come into play. How do we do that? How do we do that in the classroom? Socratic questioning. Let's go back to one of the original thinkers of critical thinking. Socrates learned that he could scaffold the thinking process, get students to analyze, to evaluate, to apply and synthesize through a series of open-ended questions. And they're specific. These questions have to be open-ended. Closed-ended questions where there's just an answer and I fill in the blank doesn't inspire students to go further, students to learn. Open-ended questions specific open-ended questions can really activate specific thought processes, the ones that you want. It also grounds learning into lived and personalized experiences. When you ask deliberate open-ended questions of the student, you can get them to analyze. You can get them to apply that information to their own context, because in order to answer an open-ended question, you have to draw from your own experience. And that's the beauty of an open-ended question. The nature of how a student answers it, the kinds of answers that come out, because in reality, an open-ended question means not everybody should be answering the same thing, right? Not everybody should have the same answer. Their answers are going to tell you a lot about the kind of learners they are, about the kinds of experiences they've had, about the ways they're thinking and processing the information. That's the beauty of an open-ended question. It's just juicy with all kinds of information for you. Here are some examples of open-ended questions that I will share with you that can activate certain critical thinking learning processes. Now, the thing about critical thinking is it's complicated, right? Thinking itself is a complicated thing. We can't group everything into compartments and boxes. For example, even though there are questions that you can ask that nurture evaluation, it doesn't mean these are the evaluation questions in this box and these are the analysis questions in this box. There's a lot of overlap because thinking itself is complex, it's multidimensional. So a lot of these questions overlap. I don't want you to get hung up on, oh yeah, I need an analysis question right away, or I need a synthesis question. There are questions that activate those things, but understand that a lot of times when you're asking a really good open-ended question, you're probably hitting a number of critical thinking skills, okay? So analyzing, and to kind of help out with getting us all on the same page, I did a quick definition of each one. These are not written in the literature. They're just more like I pulled out Webster's dictionary and I went from the stuff that I already know. Analysis is to study how different parts make the whole and what that means. Think about analysis, right? When I think visually of analysis, I think of a magnifying glass that's looking very closely at certain parts of things. And what does it mean to maybe the whole puzzle? What does it mean to me? What's the big picture, right? So some questions that you can ask that touch on analysis: compare X to Z, right? Comparing things is a great way of getting students to analyze. How is it similar or different to whatever else it is, right? Why is it different? What are the reasons why you think these are different? What are the reasons why you think these are the same? Venn diagrams are beautiful at these analysis questions. Having students create diagrams that compare and contrast and stuff like that are wonderful ways of engaging in those higher order thinking processes. What problem are you trying to solve? And I'm not talking about you asking a student to repeat the problem you gave. I'm talking about when a student looks confused going, can you tell me what problem it is that you're confused about or trying to figure out? If you can get kids to ask questions about the problems that they're trying to work out and face, you have given them a life skill that is going to serve them well for the rest of their life. So what problem? Tell me the problem that you're thinking about or solving in this case. Why does it matter? Instead of kids going, did I miss anything important today? Instead, you can say, what do you think was important about what you learned? Why does this matter in the big picture? Why does this matter to an engineer or to a mathematician or to a scientist, right? Why do you think that matters, that we know this stuff? And what does it mean? What does it mean when you look at these data and have written this graph? What does that mean? What's the overall meaning and big picture of it, right? These are great analysis questions for that. Synthesizing is to bring different parts together to make or create something new. One of the most powerful ways of synthesis and engaging in critical thinking is recontextualizing. What recontextualizing means is to take information from one source or several sources in certain modality. And when I mean modality, it's like a form of how that information is embedded. So text is a modality. Video is a modality. An audio file is a modality. A picture is a modality. A sculpture is a modality, right? It all conveys information and sometimes emotion too. So when we ask students to take information from one source and recontextualize it into something else, like, for instance, take this information from this book and create a picture from it. Or take this movie and write a summary about it, right? We're asking students to interpret the information from this one modality, and then we're asking them to evaluate and think about how that information translates into this other modality. Beautiful, powerful thinking processes right there when you can have students recontextualize, synthesize, create things. So some questions you can ask about this. What are you going to make? Why? What's the best way to teach this information? I'm saying with this question to the student, I've given you this information. How would you teach this to your classmate, right? Think about the critical thinking there, to ask a student to teach it to somebody else. How will you solve this problem with the things that you have? A big question that came up in the conference was, how do I have STEM challenges when kids all have different things? It's not actually a problem. The problem is this: how do I get kids to engage in critical thinking processes with all these different things? It's the process that we want kids to really think about. It's not the thing that they make, it's the process of them making the thing that we want to push on, that we want to add rigor to, right? So a STEM challenge, when you say create a thing, it's not the thing that we're analyzing. It's how did you make it? Tell me the process that you used to make it. How can you make it better, right? Why did you make it? What did you make from these things? Lots of questions out there. So how do you solve the problem with the things you have? What did you leave out and why? What can you do with X? How can you use Y? Blanks, right? What can you combine to make whatever? And what did you do? Notice these are kind of open-ended, yes. And I wrote them vaguely to help you, take some of these things and make them your own for whatever context it is. Here's my recipe for critical thinking. I take whatever it is that we create, whatever it is that you want to teach, then I sprinkle a few of these things, a few of these questions into the mix to get them to analyze and synthesize and evaluate and create, right? This is how we get the critical thinking. We're making more with the amount of information, with the less. We're making more, we're making them do more with this. Evaluating and reflecting is to judge the credibility or usefulness of something and to reflect on it by judging it again. So what was the most important thing you learned out of this information? I love that, right? Having students analyze the importance, think about the importance, evaluate the importance. Was it important? Was there anything that was missing? Why or why not? In one of the panels yesterday, we talked about how do we include missing voices in our classroom? How do we look for those missing voices that we're not hearing? And one of the panelists, she had this lovely exercise where she said, when we read a book, we ask about what voice is missing. We ask about what perspectives are being represented, and then what other perspectives can you have? And what's great about that is you can actually have students apply that to almost any book. Let's take Three Little Pigs. What perspective was that written in? What if you rewrote or retold the story from the wolf's point of view, right? It allows you to think about, different perspectives, biases, critical thinking, evaluating what voices need to be in there. What additional things do you need to know or consider? How can it be better? And then what else can you use to make, where else can you use this information that you've learned? How do you apply it to different things? So, a little short video, but here's the thing about this. When I provide these opportunities multiple times to students, by the time they're done with your class, it's going to be razor sharp. Kids are going to have lots of experiences with these skills as they move on. And as you notice, these are questions that you can ask students online in distance learning. You can ask them in discussions. You can ask them as discussion questions, right? So I invite you to take these questions, adjust them, make them your own as you teach your classroom. Now, before I'm done, if you really like my training and you're wondering what you need to do for the fall, I invite you to join me for Disaster-Proof Your Elementary Teaching. So if you're an elementary teacher and you're looking to get started and you're wondering, how do I create this really strong foundation for the fall, no matter what happens, even if you're starting online, you're starting hybrid, you're starting fully in the classroom, that's okay. Because you know what? We don't know what this pandemic is going to do to us, let's face it, right? So Disaster-Proof Your Elementary Teaching is to prepare you and your families and your students for anything that can happen. So we start our training. It's a 3-day, 3 hours-ish training, August 5th through 7th live. And then afterwards, I have teamed up with Renee Heinrich from Science Schoolyard to kick off a 10-day challenge, so that bite-sized, in 10 days, you will have a plan, a solid plan, and a family packet to start your fall with success. We will share tips, tricks, and templates and other just amazing stuff in this training, and I hope you will join us. The link is in the video description below. The other thing is, I invite you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so. If you don't know if you've subscribed or not, below the video, the subscribe button, as you see here, will be in red, and you can click that. There's a little bell, which I did not take a screenshot of, but if you click on the bell, you will get reminders of whenever there's a new video. And I tried to do a video a week. Last week was a bit busy as I was preparing for conference and all this other stuff, but I do try to post a video a week on distance learning, on learning, and all kinds of things. Oh, that's the other thing. If you join Disaster-Proof Your Elementary Teaching, every Tuesday, I am there to do office hours. So any questions that you have about distance learning, about science education, about learning in general, you can ask and I will answer them in the live sessions for you. Also in the description is the link to Disaster-Proof Your Elementary Teacher Training. So I hope you join me for that. If you are a high school teacher or a higher ed professor, I am creating a challenge for you as well. It's not done yet, but stay tuned. Watch some of my videos further on, and I will be announcing that soon, okay? The other thing is, you need this. I've created, my team and I have created your distance learning, your teacher's distance learning toolkit. In that toolkit are tutorials, are tips, are links to a ton of really good things, stuff that you can incorporate into your plans for the fall. And we went to town on this. We've got tutorials, we have templates for you to use, videos, and just lots of really good resources, vetted resources of things that we thought were really cool that you could incorporate into your everyday teaching. So please go ahead and grab it in the video description. It is totally free, and I hope you will join us. So I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for joining me in this video, and I'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.